Hi, I'm Chris Grimm, founder, coach, principal consultant of ARIA Consulting. For 24 years, we've been serving leaders and their teams around the world. This podcast, which I wanted to call The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, but is called And Then I, is nothing scripted, nothing fancy. I promise that we'll be talking about successes and failures. It's the gold, I call it, that you find only in real stories with real leaders in real time. With that, I invite you to sit back, soak up the wisdom here of these everyday superheroes. Enjoy. Hi, everybody. I'm Chris Grimm, and I want to welcome you to Aria's podcast. And then we're excited. We have an amazing guest, and I am going to pass it over to my partner in crime and the voice of ARIA Consulting, Karuna Merchandani, to introduce our today's superhero. Go.
Hi, everybody. I'm so excited and so thrilled to introduce our guest today, Alex Maghen. Alex has been an executive in the digital media, entertainment, and technology space for many, many years. In fact, I think he would actually kill me if I actually told you how many. He's had very senior product technology, digital transformation roles, and worked at many organizations like MTV Networks, Yahoo Entertainment, MySpace, Warner Brothers, just to name a few. Anyway, on a personal note, I've had the pleasure of working with him and for him. And so I've seen firsthand what kind of a leader he is and why we thought he would be perfect for this podcast and this conversation we're going to have today. And in addition to being just an all-around good human, he is one of the funniest guys I know. So you're in for a real treat. Now, he did promise me that he would dress elaborately for this recording. And so far, I got to say, Alex, you could have done better. I mean, we went through so many outfit changes this morning.
Yeah.
What the hell? What
I'm
happened?
sorry. Listen, I was considering the Liberace look. Many of you are probably too young to even know who that is, but really, this is a man who wore 300 pounds of sequins. I don't really have it in me, what with the pandemic and all
It's
that.
a little heavy.
It's at the cleaners. So I just went with the more conservative look.
It's good.
Well, we're assuming we're all wearing pants, but maybe that's a whole other day.
I don't know.
Right.
I would not jump to such conclusions.
Oh my gosh. Thanks for Karuna for that. Alex, let's just jump in. If anybody's not been with us before, the whole goal of the And Then I is to get through kind of the scripted or the shallow conversations with leaders and really talk about real life. And full disclosure, everybody, Karuna mentioned she worked for Alex. I coached them both at that moment in time. And there's a lot of real life there we could talk about. But yeah, so Alex, why don't you just tell us a little bit and give everybody a frame of reference of what that means for you as a leader. You've been a leader, a tech executive through a lot. You've done a lot.
I have, as Karuna listed, I've had a lot of jobs. And one of the reasons I think why I've had a lot of jobs is because I'm not someone who is naturally satisfied with what I'm doing and what's going on. And that's not necessarily such a positive characteristic, but I have a desperate desire for things to be better, not just for me, but for the groups that I'm working with, et cetera. And I have a tendency to get impatient. So what that has done is given me so many different experiences in different places, which results in finding out that organizations and people are very different. And of course, because we're doing a podcast, I must say, and they're very much the same, right? You got to say they're very different and they're very much the same. But it's actually true, because it turns out you find out that often when you stay in generally the same area, you literally do end up working with the same people because they move around.
It's true. Yeah.
But also, there are types and there are personalities. I do not subscribe to that thing with the 4 letters.
Disc.
But whatever it is.
Disc.
I'm a PUTZ. I don't do that, but there are types of people, and you learn about who they are, and you learn about how to interact with them as their boss or their colleague. And you also learn a little bit about how they work with each other. And so I hope I've gotten better and better at it as time has gone by, while at the same time not becoming tired, old, jaded, etc. It's also really difficult to avoid that happening. You sometimes find yourself saying, yeah, I've seen all of this before. And you got to watch out for that, because you want to stay fresh.
Yeah, it's really true. But it's funny, Alex, as you were just saying that, I'm thinking, I feel like, maybe I'm wrong, so you tell me. I feel like tech executives are driving most of the transformation in almost every organization and industry that we work in. I don't know, Karuna, if you think that's different, but so I feel like that's a lot of pressure. So it's interesting when you were saying, like, you get impatient. How would you not? Like,
Right.
if
Right.
How
You
would
I
know,
feel
not
like
do
they
that?
should be, but in a lot of orgs, maybe they're not given the freedom, right? Because they really should be driving.
it also
Since
depends. It also depends on what you define as a tech executive, and that's really important. So,
yeah,
is a tech executive an engineer? I'm an engineer. I studied computer science and engineering, and I still can code, and I like to. But you know what? That's not really been my job, right? For
right.
years and years, my job has been at this level, which is about overseeing engineers, digital product people who don't know how to write software necessarily, business-oriented people who manage money, etc. And so I think part of the mistake we make is we say, oh, they're tech. Well, are they tech? In some cases, they're actually the company itself. If you're running a business whose primary function is technology, then in a lot of ways you are the business, right? Are you a technology executive? Are you a business executive? Are you a product person? I mean, the people who designed this magnificent work of art, are they technology people? It's hard to argue that they're not, but at the same time, I can't design a phone where when you open the box, you feel like, the
Right.
sun is shining and the birds are tweeting. It's the most amazing thing you've ever seen in your life. They can do that because it's a mixture of so many different disciplines. And I think that's the trick. The trick is, how can you look at all of this stuff that's being done now and saying it's a marriage of different backgrounds and types of experience and personalities, and finding a way to make all of that work together. I guess my approach has always been to say, I think that often the approach that senior leadership take is to say, engineers are a special type, graphic designers are a special type, product people, finance people, lawyers, they're all special types. And as a result, what we have to do is we have to allow each of them to operate in their own special way and interact with each other across well-established models, right? I think that's a very bad way of doing business, because what that does is that says, put everyone in their own little box, allow the engineers to sit in the dark and do their engineering-y stuff, and allow the finance people to do whatever the hell it is that they do with Excel all day long, and lawyers with Microsoft Word, and they'll communicate with each other through documents and Slack, and everything will be fine. But actually what will be is that nobody will be communicating with each other at a level that makes a difference. So what you have to do is the much harder thing, which is that you have to get an engineer who doesn't want to talk to anybody, together with a product person who never wants to stop talking to anybody, together with a lawyer who's saying we can't do anything because everything will get us sued, to a finance person who says you haven't documented how much money it's going to cost, and so therefore there's no way to move forward. And you have to pull all of those people together, and you have to give them something that gets them all excited. Like, we really want to do this. Your job, all of you, is to figure out a way to do this. Not to say we can't, but to say we can with our own special skills. And that means stepping on each other's toes a little bit, having an engineer tell a lawyer, well, why can't we do it this way? And having a lawyer say the same thing in the opposite direction. And that's uncomfortable and it makes people feel weird. And that's great.
Look, I agree with that 1,000%. And I think off camera, what I was saying, just full transparency, everybody, I was saying to Alex and Karuna, like, we really feel, and of course we have a very different perspective now. Karuna's been out of her real jobs consulting for what, 6 years?
Yeah.
And it's been a really long time since I sat internally inside a seat, right? So we have this weird consultant view of the world where we can come and go. And oftentimes that creates like a really, before COVID, it created shallowness. Before, COVID, the answer, Alex, as you know, was often us telling leaders, well, go talk to them, as if that was easy. And now I feel like, and you can tell us more than we know, probably, it's gotten more complicated because now we're all isolated and many people are not seeing anyone in person. So you can't even walk in their office and have a fight if you need to, right? Like you can't.
Hard to fight on Slack.
Another thing that people in organizational development and Brene Brown and everybody else love are pyramids. Everything has to be a pyramid. So here, I'm going to make up a pyramid for you right now. I'm Jewish. We do pyramids. We generally don't want to, but in seriousness, Karuna knows this. I've always talked, not in the pyramid form, I've always talked about kind of a hierarchy of communication. You know what? Email is actually useful, but it's the worst. It's the worst. Somewhere along the way, Slack is an interesting trick on making things work a little bit better than, right? And then there's the phone call and the audio, and then there's the Zoom. And then there's the very pinnacle of communication, which is sitting in a room and talking to each other, for God's sake, right? Generally in work, we should avoid going that next step of touching each other, but and we go in the same room and we talk and we whiteboard. And what I would say is this: I have heard over the last year since the lockdown started, such a bizarre number of people in the work world saying, this is an exciting next step. We are going to change everything. We have discovered that work can be done from home. People can Zoom their way into the future, right? And is this an explicit lyrics? Bullshit, so much bullshit. Okay, so what I would say is this: it's along the pyramid. Use it when your office is here and their office is there. But we need to end this damn pandemic, and we need to go back to the office where we sit together in the same room. I used to catch people who were literally 4 offices from each other, emailing each other over the course of 4 days. And it's a sin. It's a great sin, because and one other thing, by the way, about this lockdown concept, it's not just about productivity, it's about humanity. If you care about your workforce, and you better care about your workforce, you should realize that I have twin 5-year-old boys, and I'm learning something interesting. Starting at around 3, they start interacting with other kids, and they don't stop until they're 18 or 22 when they go to college or whatever, right? Can you imagine if our civilization changed such that after college, when you started going to work, you suddenly went back home and you're no longer in a social environment?
Right.
People who work from home in what used to be called the corporate world or the work world, we're going to start seeing them go crazy. Over the course of the next few years, companies that don't make everybody come back to work are going to start seeing higher incidences of depression, physical problems, and general lack of ability to sort of focus on their work. This is not the answer.
We're not
popular in this position.
We're not meant to operate that way.
Totally.
Right.
I think we're seeing it. Alex.
Yeah,
I think,
exactly.
you know, we have, I don't know how you spend your days, but like, I'm assuming you spend like the rest of us, right? Either interacting with your family in a pod or getting out when you can, or in Zoom, right? Like
Yeah.
that's kind of how it's
Yep.
worked. And, you know, we had some clients who were early adopters of send everyone home.
Yeah.
Amazon is a great example.
Yeah.
We've been working with some of their exec teams since the beginning of this, right? They were a bit ahead of the curve, actually. So because they were first, or one of the first, they kind of dealt with all the things that happened afterwards. So not just them, right? Any of our clients, we got to witness some of the people breaking down.
Yeah.
To your
Yeah.
point, right? And I think that, you know, you were saying you don't like the 4-letter like disc model. It doesn't, to me, that doesn't matter. I think it's just interesting though to see people who at first, some of our clients that were more introverted were happy about this, right? And then some of them were the first to start to break.
Right.
Right.
Look, don't get me wrong. I don't
Interesting,
want to.
right?
I don't want to suggest that there aren't people for whom it is actually the right thing for them to work from home, either
Yeah.
because of aspects of their personality or because at this point in their lives they have to. I mean, I want to be, if somebody's brilliant at their job, my rule is if you're brilliant at your job, I'm going to let you get away with murder, right? So not murder. So,
Yeah.
but like, yes, you should be able to work at home because you've got a kid and the needs to do whatever. That's fine. But the general approach of the organization should be one of cohesiveness, of that this is the most social thing you do. I mean, the pandemic makes it so bad because not only are we at home for work, we also can't be at home. We're also at home for everything else.
Yeah.
But when the pandemic ends, it still represents half of your life, or, you know,
It's true.
a third plus of your life.
Right.
You can't spend all of that time in a room looking into these screens without, you know, A, going nuts, and B, not developing the kinds of relationships that ultimately is where success comes from at work.
Mhm.
I gotta say, as somebody who has developed wonderful close relationships at work with people like, oh, I don't know, Karuna, and terrible relationships with people that I did not get along with, and it was really bad. I've come to recognize that it's 60% of the success, right? It's not about, oh, I have the ultimate skill set in this space and therefore it doesn't matter how I interact with anyone else, because unless you're the only person doing the work, it's not going to happen.
Right.
You know?
Mhm.
You asked some questions about, you know, what makes a good leader or a great leader for this time. And, you know, there are a bunch of characteristics, especially, you know, in tech. There are a bunch of characteristics that I think are really important. One of them is you actually have to know your tech. It's an interesting thing that people don't realize is when you're way up here at the top of a technology organization, you can't get stale because technology people will eat you alive.
Totally.
The engineers will, either they'll bullshit you and they're really good at it. Oh, you can't do that because the carburetor won't, blah, 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 blah. And then, you know, right? Or they just simply, you don't have cred, and you have to have cred. So you should know your stuff. I mean, I think that's one. I think there's this other thing that for me has been so hard and so critical to doing it right. And Karuna and I had plenty of time to try to work on this together when we worked together, is this concept of radical transparency as the opposition to CYA.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
right, what is the most natural human instinct? Is to cover your ass. I mean, literally, like, go back 20,000 years, and what your job was is to keep that thing outside of the cave from killing you, right? It's about protecting yourself. And here we are trying to create environments where people are saying, you know what, I'm not going to pretend that I didn't screw up, or I'm not going to pretend that this project is nowhere near done, even though, it's due tomorrow, or any of the things that you might try to cover yourself for. Creating an environment where that it's not only safe to admit that things aren't going well, it's almost something that you wear as a badge of honor.
Mhm.
I'm the guy who said, oops, we really blew this. That is a really hard thing to get an organization to embrace.
Yeah.
And by the way, you can never stop either, because it's not like once you get them started working that way, that it stays that way.
Yeah.
The natural human instinct is to head back in the direction of covering it. And by the way, going back to Zoom, there ain't no better way to avoid sharing what's going on than being able to do that.
Completely true.
Yeah. So I think that is such a critical aspect, is creating an environment where, radical transparency is like, it's everything. It is a badge of honor to say, I don't keep things from not only my bosses, but my colleagues and the rest of the company. That's a real tough thing to do. And doing that by example means admitting to the people who report to you that you screwed up.
Yeah.
Admitting to your bosses and your colleagues, we didn't do it. We didn't do it right. That's really hard to do, because you think that it's going to block you from climbing the ladder. And the sad thing is, sometimes it might.
I was just going to say,
That's
right.
Yeah.
I mean,
well, especially if you, I don't, go ahead, Karuna. I was just going to say something. We're probably thinking the same thing. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, this is just about being vulnerable, right? And organizations are not set up for people to be vulnerable, because the ability to be transparent and say, I'm sorry. I mean, it happened this morning, right? Angela Merkel admitted this morning about the latest lockdown in Germany, and she took responsibility for, as a leader, saying it was her decision, was a bad decision. And the news media is reporting it like, oh my God, she actually admitted she did something. Nobody does that.
Okay, so look, just an aside. I am infatuated with Angela Merkel. I want Angela Merkel action figures. I can't get enough of her. Every time she talks, with those dowdy outfits she wears and that look on her face of dissatisfaction with everyone, I can't get enough of her. She's the best. Anyway,
excellent. I want to be that when I grow up, by the way. I want to be able to, everywhere I go, just be dissatisfied.
Right. She's got this
practicing.
She's great. I wanted to mention two other things on this subject of technology leadership. I don't know if this is true of all forms of management. I'll speak for what I've done. You have to be everywhere. And what I mean by that is, there's this kind of notion of don't micromanage. I don't know what the gray area, there's a gray area between micromanagement and being there, but you have to be there. You can't say, well, I have 7 direct reports and they have, 150 to 2,000 people under them. So all I have to do is interact with those 7 people. The hard thing about it is, if you want to be good at this, for some reason, your job is 90% meetings, because it's 90% running around and understanding what people are doing and talking to them and sort of imbuing your philosophy, not only way up at the fluffy level with pyramids and things, but down at the well, why are we doing it this way? Let's do it this way instead level. You have to be seen, and they have to know you're there and that you want to understand what they're up to. You're not just, floating around in the ether. And that's hard, because it means that you don't have a lot of time to answer emails, because you're spending all of your time, running around meeting with people. But it makes such
I think that's
difference.
an extra, right? So, I mean, I've had the privilege really of being with you guys in a situation that was degree of difficulty 20,
perhaps impossible.
Right. But as you're talking, Alex, I was like, oh my gosh, right. So important and extra almost when you put yourself in a situation where it does seem impossible to everyone. Morale is low, so then, everything you've said, which is, really great wisdom for leaders, now that's got to be tenfold, right? Like getting people to be vulnerable when you walk into a situation where it's already a turnaround or bad.
Yeah, and then not having, your team of 7 direct reports get all, irritated or annoyed with the executive who's walking around talking to other people because they're afraid they're just afraid. They're like, what's happening? Right. Why is he talking to him? He's my person.
Well, so interestingly, right, the CYA environment contributes to what Karuna's talking about. If you don't have that, they don't care.
Exactly.
If they aren't worried that I'm talking to somebody who reports to somebody who reports to somebody who reports to me, it's because they know that they don't have anything to hide. It's all right. You know what? If I come back to the person who reports directly to me and says, one of your people, told me that you're doing X, Y, Z, that shouldn't be upsetting. It shouldn't be surprising. It's also against human nature. So you got your work cut out for you. So my 2 others are, technology is not the answer. So interestingly enough, you can run a technology organization, but you're not going to solve your organizational challenges and your productivity challenges and your morale challenges with technology. You're not. You can use Yammer or whatever, like social networky type of things to lubricate the process. And there's nothing wrong with that. But you know what? If you're using Yammer, it means you're writing things, you're posting things, you're caring, right? And so ultimately there is this feeling that all you have to do is create the right structures and processes and it'll fix itself. And I don't really think it works that way, which brings me to, I was thinking before we had this call today, if there was like one rule that I think I believe in more than any other, and that I've repeated more times to more bosses of mine than any other, it's people over process. If you run a large corporation, I haven't run one, I've been relatively senior, right? You're desperately trying to get it to not be a mess. You want it to make sense. And well, what's the best way to have it make sense? You establish structure. You establish processes. There's a document that comes in whenever there's a request to do a thing, and you follow that process. And if you do, everything will be fine. Well, except it won't, because you cannot possibly create a process that will process you into success, right? What you really have to do is you have to invest a huge percentage of your effort in the people that report to you, and believing that they know what they're doing, that they have the right approach, that they have the right personality, that they care, right? And once you do that, it's not to say that you shouldn't create processes, but the processes will almost magically create themselves if you have the right people. And if you don't have the right people, it won't matter what processes you put into place.
It's true.
It's really good.
So what I'm saying is fire people. I'm not. That's not what I'm saying. Not
fire everybody.
So I know that you've done startup before. So if you were going to, maybe you're going to tell us that, if you were going to start something right now, or were like, what would you do, differently so that you could maybe get in front of some of these issues?
It's been interesting about my resume. Some people they start off in big companies and then they go and do startup. And there are other people who maybe they start off in startup and they go to big companies. I have ping-ponged back and forth. And I think that the reason why, and this isn't that flattering, the reason why is because when I'm in a big company, I spend so much of my time ripping out what's left of my hair and saying, why are you so bureaucratic, and why and nothing moves, right? And then I go to the startup world and I say, how can you possibly be this irresponsible? I mean, how can you possibly say, well, we'll just wait till we're sued, about this thing and that thing that full well is a nightmare. So I think that were I to start something up, I actually think I'm in a pretty good place to do that, because I can see the advantages and disadvantages of both mentalities, and striking the right balance between those. I mean, it's a little boring, right? It's so much more fun to be able to say the right answer is you do it like the startups, right? Yeah, that doesn't work, because what happens is that probably works at the very beginning. But very quickly, if you have any success, you run into you hit the wall of not knowing how to hire people. Right. Nobody likes human resources people, except it turns out that they know how to do some shit, right? And understanding how to your technology has to be done right, both from a security perspective and because, I used something that I thought was open source, and then a year later I was sued because it turns out that the very core of my technology belongs to somebody else. I mean, you have to have kind of a balance of that understanding. But in terms of organization, what I would say is, wherever you are, the things that I was just describing before apply the same way. If you start working in a large corporation and take over a large organization, as I've done several times, you have to work to transition that organization into one where CYA is a no-no, where the communications pyramid, I don't know, I just decided to call it that, is the approach, and where radical transparency is so important, and where people are more important than process. That's true there. That's true at a startup, right? I think that the same rules apply, and I think that another factor is being able to say, I have to balance today against 3 years from now. Big corporations focus too much on 3 years from now, and they lose out on today. And startups focus exclusively on today, and then they have no idea what to do tomorrow. Yeah. So, that's again, it's a matter of striking a balance between the two, but you can. And I don't know, it's one of the advantages of being old and having experience.
I was just thinking as you were talking, Alex, the one thing that, well, there were many things that I admired about you, but one of the things that always surprised me was your ability to say the hard things in the moment, because that is immensely complicated, right? But you just kind of went at it. And it was refreshing, because few people do that. Few leaders actually do that, And I'm just curious about your thoughts about that, because it was definitely something that made you, it was a differentiator for you as a leader, if that makes sense.
Thank you. Right. Thank you for the first thing you said, and thank you for that too. I wish that I could say that approach to things is a studied and very carefully planned approach. It's not. I'm a New Yorker. It's an element of my personality that I can't just carefully chew and think over weeks and months what the right way of presenting an idea is. And I'll just be honest and say it does not always work. There are companies that simply cannot handle that approach to communication. And, Warner Brothers had about 2 years ago invested a large amount of personnel time and money on this big push to embrace Brene Brown's most recent thing. What's it called?
Dare to Lead, or
Dare to Lead.
Yeah.
Right. And I actually kind of, I have a kind of natural problem with all those books. And yet certainly everything she had to say felt like what I embrace.
Yeah.
And they spent probably, 100,000 personnel hours, right? Getting people to go through these role playings. And I thought that was great. But there is this one problem, which is, and I read the book, she doesn't talk about one critical thing in the book, which is all of her advice works if your company embraces what you're doing. But if your company doesn't embrace what you're doing and you decide you want to rumble, this is this term for the way you interact. If you rumble with a bunch of extremely uptight people who don't like the rumbling, you're in some serious trouble, right? And so what I would say is, I have never been able to avoid communicating with my bosses, my colleagues, the people who report to me in a way that felt genuine and open and, not only direct, but sort of open to argument in both directions. But you have to be aware of the fact that you will work in companies and in environments where some people won't be able to handle that, and that person might be your boss. And then what do you do, right? So on one hand, I can't do it any other way because it's just my nature. On the other hand, there have been work situations where that has not redounded to my benefit. And I don't have an answer for what to do about that.
Well, Alex, it's interesting. I echo everything that Karuna said, by the way, even though sometimes I was the coach who had to say, Alex, are you sure you want to do that?
Right. I remember that very well.
But here's the thing, we grapple with this all the time. And I've actually recently, I won't name the name of the organization because I don't think they would like it, but I had to say to the boss, right? It seems to me that you want your executives to be completely open and rumble and do all of these things. And by the way, we've brought some of those books and some of those skills and facilitated some of those role plays. And as you know, I'm always coaching people to be more authentic and to do those things. But yet in that situation, it's exactly what you're saying, where I had to, and it's fine as a consultant, as a coach, I can put my mortgage on the line. That's what I should be doing, by the way, because no one client pays my mortgage, unlike you in your job, which is why most of your peers won't do what you do, because it does put your mortgage on the line and your bonus and everything else you're saying, which is why people don't do it. But I had to say to that boss, oh, wait, so you want them to use these skills and behaviors with their own people and with each other, but not with you.
Yeah.
Silence.
Right.
It's true. And I'll tell you something. I mostly agree with you about the difference between your scenario and mine, but I will point this interesting thing out. A large corporation is as political as the Senate. Don't make that joke, Alex. No, I won't. But
the sock puppet's coming out.
But what I will say, and so what I mean by that is this: yes, you have a boss, and ultimately, in many or even most situations, your boss can you. But you also have friends, and your friends may be as powerful as your boss. And your friends may actually tell your boss, no, you won't. By the way, something which I am absolutely sure has happened with me any number of times. So what I would advocate is, when you are in a corporate environment, as opposed to like a tiny startup, recognize that your boss may be in charge of you from an HR perspective, but you have colleagues that you are doing things for. Sometimes people call those clients. I don't like that term because they're my partners in the company. We're all trying to do the same thing. But if my organization does great work for such and such a group, then I have done great work, and my boss might have to say, I can't stand this person, but what am I going to do? He's amazing or she's amazing. And I think that's actually a really important thing to remember. You're not, yes, ultimately and formally, you have one boss, but more often than not, you have a group of people who understand the value that you bring, and you want to make sure that that is spread far and wide, and not just because it's political. It also makes you better at your job.
Yeah, look, this to me, Alex, is, well, we knew you were going to be a great person to talk to, because for oftentimes it's very difficult to get to this conversation, because we're really talking about like integrity, right? We're talking about like having the wherewithal to know when, like you said, you have people with you. I'm going to go have the hard conversation. I'm going to push past this because it's the right thing to do. Correct. Right? The organization can't actually get to where we want to go unless these things happen. And another thing that you maybe will appreciate, the last few years, we've been having conversations around how are we contributing to the sociopathic negative politics? How are we as coaches coaching leaders oftentimes to be successful in situations where they can't represent themselves with the highest authenticity and integrity? And I feel like, you as a boss are probably thinking about that for your own people all the time, right? Like how do you role model that? How, not just admitting you're wrong, but helping them do what's right.
Yeah. Obviously, there are circumstances where you can't even advocate that they do what's right for the company by saying, if you do what's right for the company, it will benefit you. Because sometimes that's not even true, which is horrible, right? Yeah. But it does lead me to something which is, I don't know, it's sort of an aside, but I think it's a really important one. There are people, I have a best friend who is a social worker that helps Holocaust survivors. Guess what? Her work is important. There is no question, period. Her work is important. Right. Is my work important? I've made websites for Harry Potter, and I've made technology that distributes the Wonder Woman movie. Is that work important? When I go home at night, did I do a heart and lung transplant today? Right? The reason why I bring it up is because there are actually two sides to the work that you do. There's the actual output product to the shareholder in the corporation. And if that gets you down, and it will always sometimes get you down. Even, by the way, if you're doing heart and lung, transplants. Interestingly, if you're a manager, or even if you're not, there's another side, which is you are responsible for a certain number of human beings, not only their income, but what they do every day and how they feel every day. And if you're feeling down about your ability to make the best cogs, whatever it is that you make, maybe spend a little bit of time saying, well, wait a minute, what am I doing to make the people who come to the office, or in this case, the Zoom, actually feel like I learn, I like the people I work with, I feel good coming to work every day. That actually matters. And in some cases, in terms of what happens when you die and God decides where you go, that might be more important than the first part. But certainly, I'm not a religious person. That was just, certainly it's something worthwhile considering. And the amazing thing is, it will almost always redound to the benefit of the company too. If you actually care that these people like coming to work every day, eventually, assuming you don't get canned in the meantime and things don't fall apart, eventually the company will benefit tremendously from what you've done. So I would just say, keep that in your pocket whenever you're feeling like, dear God, what the hell am I doing here? Well, you're doing that. And that makes a big difference, because that's about people. That's as close as most of us are going to get to the heart and lung transplant.
Couldn't have put it any other better way, Alex.
I was going to
Honestly,
say, drop the mic,
Drop
Alex.
the mic for sure. For sure.
I used to say, look, I still do actually, once every 6 months when I have an all hands meeting. I don't know if I did this when we worked together. I started it 7 or 8 years ago. I do my version of the harassment training. So
Oh God.
there's the real harassment training. Well, no, listen, seriously. There's the real harassment training that's really important, where people learn and understand what that really means and how to avoid ever crossing that line and all that. And then there's my speech, which is, if I ever find out that you have made a person feel like they're scared to come to work in the morning, I will destroy you. There. That's my speech. And I do mean it, because while it's the negative flip side of what I just said before, ultimately we all have a responsibility to say, when a person wakes up in the morning and they have to go to work, do they dread it or do they welcome it? And if you can avoid them dreading it and you can make them welcome it and be excited about it, you're doing something right.
Yeah.
What else? Please don't ask me about my mentorship and inspiration. I don't know. Donald Trump. I don't know. No.
No, I was going to say, we only have a few more minutes left, but I did want to ask the question, like, what is the story you tell over and over again with your people? Like, what lesson, or, you know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah,
come on, we're all old together. So what is the story you tell over and over again?
Oh, well, I love to tell stories about failure. I really do. I mean it. I love to tell stories about my biggest complete screw ups, right? So one story that I tell was way back in the early 1990s. I worked at AT&T, and I came up with this brilliant idea. It was brilliant. And what it was there were, thousands of people in the company who were creating graphical assets. And what I was going to do was I was going to develop a system that hooked into software like Photoshop and all of the other applications that developed assets, and then hooked into a central database. And what it would do, it was guarantee that all of the assets, when they were created, would be named correctly, would be captured and cataloged in a database correctly, etc. And I pitched this in a, if I do say so myself, brilliantly passionate presentation to my boss's boss, who basically made it rain for me in the meeting, because I was going to solve a huge problem in the company. I spent, along with about 18 people who worked for me, a year developing this system. It was magnificent. It was a
work of art.
We rolled it out, and from the very moment we rolled it out, it was such a catastrophic failure. It didn't do anything the way anybody needed it to be done or was used to having it done. It ran contrary to all of the sort of creative approaches that people took to doing things. And I was left sitting there saying, but I don't understand. Like, it's perfect, right? So, and then I was promoted, but we'll put that aside. What I'm saying is happened. Remember, you can fail up. I use that as an example of a few things. One, presuming that you understand the way a user or a consumer actually wants things to work, because you're an engineer, and an engineer knows how everything will be perfect in the world, right? If everyone was just turned into a cog, it would be magnificent, right? So that's one. Two, never do a project for a year. Never, ever, ever do a project for a year. You do a project and you roll out pieces of it over a month or 3 months at most. You don't pull the curtain off the thing and say, voila, catastrophe, right? That's also not something that you do. And so, I have found this to be one of my most spectacular failures. Oh, it was a lot of money too. I won't say how much. It was one of my most spectacular failures, and one that I think I learned from more than a lot of the rest of them too. And it's always good to talk about your failures because it makes you look good. So, I do like that one, and it is also it's the sort of original source of what has become apparently I have a mantra. Somebody made one of those desk plaques for me that says this, which is yes, but faster. I have Karuna would probably agree that that's probably
Yes.
of mine.
Yes.
The triangle that says, it's always pyramids and triangles, that says you can have speed, price, and quality, right?
Right.
I guess I have, maybe because I'm in the technology world, come to believe that of those three in business, speed is always the most important one. It always is, because cost is always much cheaper than time.
Yeah.
And quality is something you can largely fix, right? But time is something, if you don't do things quickly, somebody else will, and their thing will be less good than your thing, but they will have done it already. I mean,
Correct.
and so it's sort of an offshoot, but I'm generally of the belief you've got to do things quickly, get them out, fix them.
Yeah.
It's I guess the agile model, sort of.
Yeah.
I'm a little leery of the term agile because it's sometimes used as a cover for, I don't know when this thing will be done.
In many places.
It's true, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
And by the way,
engineering now.
well, right. By the way, takes us all the way back to the beginning of conversation, which is when you work in a company, even a small one, you can say, well, we're agile with capital A. We use the agile model, right? Well, that's cute, except for one thing. From what I understand, I'm Jewish, but from what I understand, Christmas is on December 25th every year. And if your sprints don't line up with December 25th, you can't say, you know what we've done? We've bumped Jesus's birthday this year because we're in the middle of an epic. I mean, it's ridiculous, right? And so it's very important for an entire company to understand that when you're talking to the marketing people, you can't say, oh, it's not on our sprint. No, you have to translate. You have to say, well, we believe the date is now X. Right? You must. And by the way, the marketing people should invest in understanding the way you operate too. It should go both ways. But if it doesn't, it's still your obligation to translate to the rest of the organization. You can. You can still do it your way, but you have to perform that translation.
Yeah.
So much. Did you hear my dog also just decide to be in the conversation? Shasti, do you agree with Alex? Wow.
Did she bark once?
No, she just did a little growl and a little it was I think her way of saying amen, hallelujah.
There you go.
To everything that you've just said. I am just super grateful for this. I couldn't have asked for better. In fact, we might have to have you back for a part 2, Alex. And
it would be my pleasure. I do feel that I need to say this. I have worked with organizations that have done organizational development and transition. I don't know what's called. Stuff. Probably 6 or 7 of them in my career, and they generally suck. And you guys, you were very special at a time that that was excruciating and incredibly difficult in our corporate, life. And the reason why is because a lot of the stuff that we talked about here, you weren't full of shit. You didn't use a lot of pyramids. You you really talked to us in a very direct and open way. You didn't candy coat things, and that's what we needed more than anything else. And I just, I really like to praise organizations that are, of a set that generally don't do it well, to say that you really did make a huge difference because of that difference in attitude and approach. And I hope you'll keep it up, always.
We don't, just like you, Alex, we don't know another way.
Right. I was going to say, can't
Thank
help
you,
ourselves.
by the way, for that. It was nice. It was really nice of you to say that.
I mean,
but I got to tell you, we started at the top of the hour with you kind of saying that about yourself. And I would say that about us too. There are definitely organizations we don't belong in because we don't want to be a part of the problem.
Right. Totally understood.
Perpetuating it. Yeah.
Yep. You were part of, by the way, my Kobayashi Maru.
Yeah.
Does Karuna know what that is?
You've told me a million times, and
Yes.
But for Chris,
I'm not going to explain it.
No, come on. Come on. Go ahead.
Fine. Everything in life that really matters is derived from Star Trek. Okay.
Yeah.
And the Kobayashi Maru is a test. It's a part of the test that you need to go through to become a captain of a starship in Starfleet. And the test it's a simulation on the bridge, and you're attacked from all angles. There is no way to win. You will lose, and your ship will be blown up. It can't be won. And the reason why the Kobayashi Maru is so important is you learn about whether the captain handles catastrophe well. It's not just about handling victory. It's not just about how to get there. It's also about handling catastrophe. And you guys were there for our Kobayashi Maru. It was bad, but it made a difference. It did. And I will also say that there's only one person who's ever solved Kobayashi Maru, and that was, of course, Captain Kirk.
I was going to say Captain Kirk. Yeah.
He did. And I will not give you any more than that, except to say that those of you who care will go and research it.
Exactly.
That's right. Yeah, I love that.
Absolutely right.
That's awesome.
Nice way to end that.
I'm going to say thank you, Karuna. I'll let you close us because you're more graceful than me.
No, hardly. This was amazing.
Always, Alex.
Thank you guys so much
You're
for having
amazing.
me. I'd love to do it again anytime.
We'd love to have you back.
Bye.
Great. Bye, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks for joining us.